Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Got it. Second. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. And welcome to the future of communities in a post-pandemic world. Jeff, our presenter, is an economic development professional with a successful 45-year career in urban planning, community revitalization, and economic development. He has worked at the local, regional, and state level in Michigan, Missouri, Kansas City, and Prince William County in Virginia, and held a variety of senior leadership positions. Jeff's focus has included land use planning, community redevelopment, real estate and economic development financing, technical assistant, program and policy creation, strategic planning, workforce training, entrepreneurship, legislation, and economic incentives. So welcome, Jeffrey. And just so you know, everybody, he's my brother.
Full disclosure, right?
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone from Tucson, Arizona. It's nice and sunny here. The monsoon season has started, so we've actually had some rain and cooler weather, cooler being like 90 here. But we needed it. It's been a very, very dry season. So I'm going to share the screen now. I think you've all got copies, I think, of the outline, right? If not, let me pop that up. Okay. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to follow this outline. If something comes up while I'm talking and you want to pop in, feel free. But Kim and Carol have asked for questions at the end of the presentation. But if something comes up, just jump into the conversation. And I'm going to get going. So I guess my first thought was, as I looked at the title of Future Communities in a Post-Pandemic World, I don't know that we're ever going to have a post-pandemic world. I think this pandemic, and I'm not a medical person, but I think this pandemic is going to be here forever. I shouldn't say pandemic, I should say the virus will be here forever. It's going to be, I think, from what I read and hear, much like the flu. You're going to have this every year, and it's just going to be a matter of getting your vaccines or not to protect you. And I think the vaccines will be modified over time. People get booster shots and so forth, but we are going to have to live with this COVID-19 or some derivative, just like we do with the flu and all the other type of diseases that we've had as a continuation. In any case, it has fundamentally changed a lot of things, certainly over the last year and a half. So starting with migration patterns, last year in 2020, over 7 million households moved in the United States, which is 500,000 more households moving than did the previous year. And there's been a lot of reports about people fleeing the big cities and moving out to the hinterlands. The fact of the matter is most of the moves were to adjacent counties to big cities within the same metro. So it's not that everybody vacated New York City or Los Angeles to Holland, Michigan. They really moved within their metro areas for the most part. However, most cities were already seeing slower growth in the 1920 period, 2019 to 2020, but only the largest cities actually lost population. And the big losers were New York, Los Angeles, San Jose, Boston, and San Francisco. The biggest population gainers as a percentage of growth in the 2020 period were Austin, Texas, Fort Worth, Seattle, Tampa, and Tucson, Arizona. The small towns which did grow during the last year or so were ones that had certain attributes. And I think this is something Holland should think about. To be successful, attributes that included quick accessibility to a big metro, near a major airport, near a major university, or hosting a elite college or a research type university, having a robust arts and cultural scene, extensive outdoor recreation options, and or near a national park, a coastline, or a lake. Interesting, I think Holland has many of those attributes, but those kinds of small towns with those attributes were ones that did well. The drivers of the migration, I think it's pretty easy to understand. First of all, I think there was what I call a pandemic panic. When it hit, people freaked out basically and started leaving for whatever reason, just weren't sure what was going on because we never encountered anything like that. So you found a lot of fleeing of density, big urban areas. Also, a lot of people had second homes. If you were affluent and it had a second home, people moved to those. We saw a lot of this in the New York metro area. People were looking for affordability and value, and they valued more space, especially outdoor space, as well as larger homes that they could afford. And the only way they could afford them was moving out of the core city. Also, and obviously a large driver was the shift to work from home, telework. That was already starting, but it accelerated during the pandemic. People wanted to be near outdoor amenities, recreation. One other thing, to be frank, is there was a lot of violence in the streets last summer. And I think that spooked a lot of people. And so that combined with some of these other factors got some people thinking about moving to a smaller environment away from the big cities. And then, of course, low mortgage rates. They've been moving up, but right now we're in historically low mortgage rate territory. And there was a lot of money sloshing around. The federal government pushed a lot of stimulus money out, and there was money in their pockets. People weren't traveling, so they were saving money to use for buying a new home and that sort of thing. So those are the big drivers of the migration trend over the last year and a half. In terms of workforce, this is, I would say, the major impact of the coronavirus. And that is the shift from in-office to remote locations. Before the pandemic, less than 10% of the United States workforce worked from home, either full or part-time. That jumped up at its peak last summer and early fall to 33%. People were working full or part-time remotely. That's dropped back to about 20% now. And that's for both full and part-time workers. And that seems to be the point at which it's going to stay, although the jury's still out on that. And I'll talk about that a little later. But surveys show that many workers they love it. They love working from home, or they like the hybrid model where they're going in, 1 or 2 days a week into the office, the rest of the time working from home, or they're, nomads, digital nomads, and they're working from, I don't know, their boat or wherever. But the work from home thing is here to stay, and it's here to stay at a higher level than it was in the past. A lot of employees now, when given the mandate to come back to the office, are saying, no, and I'm going to quit, find another job that has flexible work situation. So companies are trying to balance this, and I'll talk about this more a little later on. So it's a dilemma. Some companies like Zillow, Salesforce, Slack, Nationwide Insurance are allowing permanent work from home. They're saying, you can do this. We'll figure out the compensation package. We'll figure out, the other aspects of this. But other companies, conversely, JP Morgan, Abbott Labs, Fifth Third Bancorp, and in Michigan, United Wholesale Mortgage, which is a Pontiac, are requiring their workers to come back to the office. Some have already done that. Some are saying, okay, September 1st, you're all back in the office. No ifs, ands, or buts. So that's an interesting dilemma. The employment lawyers will be making a lot of money over the last few years trying to figure out, as they represent either the companies or the employees, how that's all going to work out. But having said that, not everyone can work remotely, right? If you're a software engineer or you're in media, designing websites or whatever the case may be, working from home, easy, no problem. But if you're waiting tables in a restaurant, you're in the personal service industry, manufacturing, warehousing, retail, cleaning, public safety, maintenance, that's not an option. You have to be in the office or on your fire truck or in the warehouse or whatever. So think about that. And it's having the effect of a two-tier system. It's exacerbating that. People that are well-paid software engineers and so forth, piece of cake, right? We can do this. We have all the ability to say yes or no, whatever we want. But for the others, they're stuck. So what are you going to do? Additionally, companies are trying to find ways and have discovered that they can sell their products or services with a leaner workforce than they had coming in the office. General Motors is a great example. You go back to the 70s or 80s, General Motors had 3 or 4 times the number of employees that they have today. Yet today, they can actually produce more cars and with a much smaller workforce. Why? Robotics, technology, artificial intelligence, and so forth, and just production methodologies that allow them to be more efficient. All companies are having that conversation now and finding that they can have a remote workforce and don't need as many people remote and in office that they needed before. So they're looking at ways to take advantage of something that the pandemic has brought forth. The other thing that the pandemic has shown is the weakness and fragility of our supply chain. Think of the products that have been in short supply or problems. Medical equipment, computer chips, lumber, toilet paper, specialty foods. Today where I live, they're trying to re-roof a building with roof tiles, and they can't get them. They're back ordered. Furniture, people are waiting months and months to get furniture, on and on and on. So companies are realizing they have to find ways to localize their supply chain, smaller warehouses, if you will, closer to the customer, and they're stocking up. Back in the day, the auto companies used to have, the Kanban theory. They bring it on just-in-time inventory. No longer. They're stockpiling parts nearby now because of the supply chain issue. And right now, again, in the automotive industry, you've seen what's going on with computer chips. So Ford, General Motors, Stellantis are all closing, idling plants that can't produce cars and trucks. And that's a whole nother issue. But consumer shopping patterns, obviously shopping online, who hasn't used Amazon or whatever else. So that's permanent, and also services now, legal, accounting, medical, financial, and so forth. People are doing that online. You don't have to go see your banker, right? Or your attorney. My financial advisor is in Kansas City. We do all our meetings on Zoom now. So, that's permanent and that's going to stay. And then people are, in terms of their consumption patterns, you look at what they're doing at home, you're streaming, whether it's movies or games, people are doing curbside pickup, DIY, etc. So you can see that whole space of how people are interacting with products and services has permanently changed. Let me go on to the community impacts. Again, I'll break this down by type. For central cities, the pandemic, you're seeing and did see higher vacancies, lower rents, and then the job loss that goes with that. Because as office workers leave the central city, what does that do for people that are working in restaurants, shining shoes, delivering things, and so forth? Those jobs disappear. And so it's going to have a follow-on impact in the secondary and tertiary service markets as office workers aren't working every day downtown. Even if they come back, they're going to not come back 5 days a week, probably. They're going to come back 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. So that's going to shift the employment patterns in the central cities. The physical space repurposing will continue. Office buildings will be converted to housing. That's been happening for years. Residential only buildings now will start hosting co-working space and places where small businesses can have startup areas, or there will be live workspaces where apartments can have a dual purpose of working as well as living. Parking structures, you're not going to have as many cars downtown. What does that mean? They're going to be converted to warehouses or even data centers. And streets are changing. I don't know what's happened in Holland, but I know certainly in the DC area and here in Tucson, streets are being changed for sidewalk dining. You don't need all that space and other uses in areas that were formerly just streets. Parking lots, you won't need as many parking lots, right? So what do? You convert them to parks or gardens or whatever the case might be. Downtown Detroit actually has been doing this for a number of years, and that's a feature that will continue. As far as public transportation, this is something that is really impacted negatively by coronavirus. Transportation systems are already struggling, And now with people working, who knows, right? It's not a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 kind of thing. They may work some days a week or off hours. The public transportation systems are built on a regularized schedule pattern. That's all changing. So their finances, I think, are in deep, deep trouble in a lot of ways. The urban crime I've mentioned, I don't know whether that's long-term. We hear a lot about it. Is it really as bad as people talk about and so forth? But we'll have to see on that. But central cities will still be attractive to Gen X, millennials, and others who want, to start careers and build their social and professional networks. So that will still happen. Moving on to suburbs, those areas, the suburbs have have really grown over the last few years. And that's been a trend for many years. That was reversed at the beginning from like 2010 to 2015. The big cities were attracting more people and jobs than the suburbs. That's changed back to the historical pattern where suburbs are gaining more than the big cities now. Suburbs are more mixed use now. They're not just, residential. So you see retail, office, and other uses there. Higher densities. Suburbs are developing remote work zones and hubs, innovation zones for startup companies and work from home people. A lot of cities, small suburbs and others are luring workers from the big cities saying, hey, you can work here, you can work from home, it's cheaper, nicer area and so forth. And suburbs tend to have more affordable housing, probably better schools in a lot of cases, good community amenities. And if they're close to a metro area, people can say, hey, that's great, I can live in this suburb. But if I want to go see a professional football game or a big concert, I can drive to the big city, once a month to do that, no problem. Small town, and one other thing, suburbs are getting older in a lot of ways, especially closer in suburbs. So they're repurposing the big malls that are emptying out. Strip malls are changing them to medical and educational uses, entertainment, even housing. Old office buildings are being converted to mixed use or community centers. So that's happening in the suburbs as they age over time as well. With regard to small towns, if they're near big metros, as I said, and have some of these other attributes, they're going to do very, very well, especially if they have a workforce that's digitally savvy, if the community has good internet, if they have an authentic downtown, a lively arts and culture scene. And then the big three of retail, this tells you whether you have a small town that's attractive to people and you're hip. You got to have Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and Starbucks, right? And if you have that, you're in good shape. All right, let me move on to real estate impacts. This is something that economic developers and others are particularly concerned about because this is a fundamental shift. Here we're talking about things that are going to last for a long, long time and trying to figure out what the long-term effect. And this is one comment I'll make right now. We are focused on what's happening day to day, week to week. We really do not know what the situation is going to be like in 6 months or a year. Just look at what's happening with the Delta variant right now. I mean, everybody was ready to open up, right? At the end of June, beginning of July. All of a sudden, LA County is going, no, you got to wear a mask inside. New York City's changing things. Schools don't know what to do. Do our kids, and parents here, I know in Tucson are conflicted. Do I send my kid back to school or do I stay online? So we don't know what the impact is going to be. And it's going to be a while before that settles out. But certain things are coming clear, I think, with regard to real estate. For office use, certainly the hoteling where you reserve space, you're not in the office every day. So you go, I just need a desk and a internet connection, and I only need that Tuesday from 7 to 9 in the morning and Friday in the afternoon. That's already been happening, and that will continue. So you're seeing that as just a continuation of an already existing trend. For retail, I mean, they'll also be have all the amenities, the food and all the goodies that they've come to like in the past. So offices will continue to have to offer that, especially if their workforce is reluctant to come into the office and going, well, can I eat there? Is there a shower there? And the other kinds of things, I might need that. And certainly office space configurations. I've been on a number of calls with real estate and people and architects are saying, we still have to reconfigure the office. We need more space. We need open areas. We need better heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system. We're going to sanitize every day. We're going to have disinfectant available, and we're going to get certification, whatever that might be, as a safe building. So when people come in, there'll be a sign on the door that says, this is a safe building. It's been cleaned and says upgraded HVAC and that kind of thing. So you will certainly see that. I think one thing that's really going to happen is, again, the co-working and live workspaces. That's already been a case for a long time. But I think for areas that are called third places, coffee shops, libraries, galleries, and others are going to be increasingly a place where people work and collaborate. I mean, it's already happening. Go to your local Starbucks or Panera, whatever. You see that, libraries. And I think that's going to continue and increase as a place to work. With regard to retail uses, certainly we've seen a diminishing of space. Retail firms do not need as much space as they had before. And so they're shrinking their space. They're doing more curbside, online. You don't need all the warehouse and storage space that you did in the past, all the space for people to wander around in the aisles. Online sales, companies are just going to, you've got to have multi-channel sales capability. So both in office and so forth. Then even the pure online that started pure online like Amazon, they're building stores, right? So you don't have to go online with Amazon. You can do it at the stores. And the one type of retail that will do well, I think, are experience retail, where they just have a line of products that people like to go see physically in space, and the space is ultra cool. They've got great staff. I mean, you think of Apple, you go to an Apple store, that's a shopping experience. You have top tech people there, the way things are displayed, but they're not the only ones. Warby Parker, Shinola, Casper, they all have showrooms that people want to do. Casper, right? You want to buy a mattress? Hard to buy online, right? Purely, you need to lay on that thing in a store. And same thing with some of the others as well. Glasses, Warby Parker started online, but a lot of people want to go in the store, put them on, see how they feel, that kind of thing. So that experience kind of shopping will grow as a part of the retail network. As far as residential, everybody can see what's happened there. As homes become workplaces and education places, do we have areas that the kids can work, or if they're in school, or mom and dad can work? Backyard, do we have enough outdoor amenities that people can utilize and so forth? So there's a lot of that change to the workspace, and I think, or the home space, and I think that multi-generational will happen. We're seeing more and more as people have lost jobs, moved in with parents, or kids have come back home, whatever the case might be. The home being able to accommodate all these many uses, that the house will be much more of a multi-use area than it was, in the past. Okay, let's move on to infrastructure. And here I'm talking really about physical infrastructure. The fewer as I mentioned before, with less commuting, patterns will change with regard to transportation. Public transportation systems, as I mentioned, are already suffering, and with fewer passengers and unknown schedules, plus the cost of cleaning and maintenance, that's going to be a real strain on the big public transportation system. I know for a fact that it's had an impact in the Washington, D.C. area where I used to live. And so that's a constant, that's going to be a constant concern. I know it was part of you saw in the president's proposed package, infrastructure package, the debate now is how much to provide for public transportation, because it's not just a matter of maintaining, it's going to be a matter, or growing rather, it's going to be a matter of just maintaining what you have. In terms of broadband, absolutely critical. With the internet now driving so much of where people can work, if your community doesn't have high-speed internet and it's available everywhere, you're in deep trouble. And another nice to have in a lot of communities that are doing this is free Wi-Fi. So when you go downtown, you don't have to walk around to find a Starbucks or McDonald's where you get free Wi-Fi. You can get it on the street. And smart communities have been doing that actually for years, but communities understand now that they need that as a part of their overall capabilities with regard to broadband. One thing that I don't have on the outline here, but I thought about afterwards, is public infrastructure systems like sewer, water, drainage, and so forth. All of those systems are being impacted by climate change. So if you're a Miami, and you're thinking about, will my downtown be flooded in 10 years because of rising sea levels? That's a big consideration as you plan your public water, sewer, and drain systems. I mean, New Orleans has been flooding for years, but this is changing now. Cities like New York and others, I can tell you that the Norfolk Naval Base is really concerned that they may have to actually relocate all the naval ships that are stationed there right now because of rising sea levels. Conversely, living here in the dry and hot and increasingly hot desert, cities like Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, and others who depend on snow melt, water runoff, aquifer systems, the Colorado River water. We are panicking out here, to be honest with you, about it. There's an article every day about the fact that the Lake Mead, Lake Powell are dropping to historically low levels. Where are we going to get our water? Snow melt is not nearly what it is. Last year, we didn't have a monsoon here. I think Tucson had 2 inches of rain last year. All this impacts your water system, right? And you can't draw infinitely from the ground. It's not being recharged. So that is going to have a big impact on cities' public infrastructure. And then, of course, how to pay for that. So that's a sustainability issue. Be very happy that you live in Michigan. The Great Lakes are an unbelievable resource that is your number one attribute in terms of differentiating yourselves from so many other areas in the United States. So if you do decide to sell your lake water, make sure you charge more than a gallon of oil or gas, so however you decide to do that. But my advice would be, don't do it. Because that is a unique asset that is really a blessing, and more importantly, an economic imperative for you. All right, let's kind of wrap this up a little bit. I'm watching my time here. I've got a few more minutes, and I'd like to make this as interactive as possible rather than hear myself yak. Winners and losers, and when you're in economic development, we always think about winners and losers, not that it's a zero-sum game or anything, but we always trying to position our communities in terms of how can we be successful going forward, and what do we need to do. I'd say that certainly mid-sized cities, and by mid-sized cities, I mean cities with populations between, say, 250,000 and 1 million. I define big cities as over 1 million. And that's just my definition, but a lot of people use those. Mid-sized cities and suburbs will do well, but they have to have the right attributes, and we talked about those. We talked about having a university or an elite college in your backyard, a mix of cultural and art amenities, a diverse workforce that's tech savvy, and near enough that, in your case, maybe you can get to a large airport in Grand Rapids, and you have access to amenities like Lake Michigan and parks and so forth and so on. The big cities that are tech focused and have in areas like finance, professional services, media, and so forth will still be successful. They may be slightly smaller in terms of population and employment, but as long as they can be relatively affordable and provide basic services while keeping crime under control, they'll still do fine. I mean, you are not going to see New York City, Boston, San Diego, they're not going to disappear. They're going to be fine. They may be slightly less dense. They may look a little different. But one thing that's good with declining rents and increasing vacancies is now maybe you can attract companies that couldn't afford rents at $50, $70 a square foot. If they drop, 10 or 15, you may attract smaller companies and startups. And so that's something that big cities, I think, will be looking at. But they do have some challenges, there's no question. But how do you replace, a Broadway, for instance, or you just can't. It's unique, and cities will have those kind of amenities. Their pro sports teams and so forth will still have those. And so they'll do fine, but will not probably grow as much as the other types of cities. The superstar cities, and there is a definition of those. It's New York, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, DC, Boston, San Diego, and San Diego created most of the jobs in the last decade, but that's changing. In cities that are outside that area, the secondary markets, Nashville, Austin, Denver, they're the ones who are taking a lot of those tech jobs that are leaving the big cities. And it's not that Amazon or Uber or Slack are leaving those big cities. They're just developing secondary office centers in those secondary markets. And so you're seeing a lot of that. You may have read about the big competition when Amazon opened their second headquarters. I happened to be in the DC area at the time, and that ended up landing in the DC area. But Austin, Nashville, Denver have landed a lot of those companies in secondary offices, and that will be something that will continue going forward. An interesting thing that for you guys is that the Wall Street Journal and Realtor.com just issued this year, they call it emerging hotspots, and they looked at all 300 of the largest metro areas in the United States. Holland's not one of those, by the way, just to let you know, so you weren't on the list. But having said that, they ranked the metros and factors that and they're heavily weighted toward housing, housing supply and demand, home costs, are home prices increasing, but are they affordable, property taxes, and also unemployment, wages, and amenities, commute times, foreign residents, they're there, and small business activity. Those are the factors that went into that. But I will say that it's mostly weighed on housing affordability and supply and demand. So here's their top 10. And this is just, current as of, in fact, they just updated that like 3 or 4 days ago. So they've already arrived. Here's the top 10 hottest spots in the United States right now. Number 1, Billings, Montana. How about that? Next, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Then Fort Wayne, Indiana, Rapid City, South Dakota, Raleigh, North Carolina, Portland, Maine, Waco, Texas, Johnson City, Tennessee, Bangor, Maine, Huntsville, Alabama. Those are the top 10. Most of those are small and mid-sized cities, affordable housing, but they have those other characteristics of a strong labor force, low unemployment rate, median wages that are good for that particular area where you can afford to do things. So those are your top 10 out of 300. So where did Michigan rank? Actually, in the first go around, I think the highest ranked Michigan city was Ann Arbor, and it was like 70th or something like that. But Ann Arbor didn't even make the list this time, probably because it's so expensive. But here's your top 10 Michigan cities out of the 300. Saginaw was 31st, probably because I think housing's like free in Saginaw, basically, isn't it? Next was Monroe, followed by Monroe was 47th. Grand Rapids, Wyoming, 109th. That was I'd say the largest big city ranking in Michigan. Detroit, 153. Niles, Benton Harbor, 157. Battle Creek, 178. Kalamazoo Portage was 183. And Muskegon was 216. So there you go. Those are the top ranked Michigan cities in this new rating. So take it for what it is. Most of the higher ranked cities were smaller and had those amenity packages that I talked about. In terms of rural areas, they're going to struggle. I think, some people have moved to the country, so to speak, but the problem in rural America is that it's been losing population for 30 years now or more. And a lot of the rural areas of the country are based on agriculture, or they're one industry towns. It might be meat processing or something of that nature. They're going to struggle. Their population is going to continue to leave, and they're going to really find it hard to be viable going forward. And the pandemic is not going to save them, unfortunately. And Rust Belt cities, let's be frank, I think, the Clevelands, Detroit, Gary, Indianas of the world are still going to struggle. They will have some good things happening, but it's going to be a while before they get back to any semblance of where they used to be. So then, in terms of conclusions, I'd say there are three big takeaways as far as I'm concerned. Oh, one other thing in terms of how states rank, I should mention that as well. This is a thing we used to, in economic development, we used to follow very closely. How does your state rank in terms of business climate? CNBC every year, I think this is their 25th year, does a state ranking of the best states for business. And this is always a big, big competition every year. One thing they changed in the most recent ranking is their factor for quality of life. They changed that to a new factor called life, health, and inclusion, where they started to deal with some of the equity issues that are confronting all of us right now. And so that is a new factor, and it's starting to change this conversation in a lot of ways. I've got an upcoming conference here of our national association. I can tell you there's a huge set of sessions on equity and inclusion. That is really fairly new to the economic development profession, but now they're starting to rank states on that. So everybody is really, really paying attention to that. Even if it's purely for economic reasons other than for social reasons. So the new ranking ranked Virginia #1. And the reason is because they ranked very, very high on the equity inclusion factor. So this is something that I know the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, touted as he was comparing Michigan to Georgia and Florida, which dropped in the rankings because of the issues they've had around equity inclusion. You heard the thing about the All-Star game and all that good stuff. So this is something that is going to be a permanent part of the conversation in economic decisions that companies make, because companies follow these rankings very, very closely. All right, so conclusions. The three big takeaways for me is that one, the pandemic didn't change existing trends, but accelerated them. As I said, work from home was already going on. It's just going on at a higher pace, a greater pace than it was in the past. So remote work is something that is with us forever now. In what balance, I don't know yet. Tech companies splitting their functions. They have a core downtown area, if you will, a core city area, but they also have secondary functions as well. Population moving to the suburbs, that's been happening and dropped off in the early 2000s. Now they're back again. And then more emphasis on quality of life and work-life balance. Boy, that's something I hear more and more. Well, people are using the pandemic to think, you know, do I really want to commute 5 days a week? Do I really want to work 70 hours a week? Do I really want to, whatever, pay those kind of rents? And so people are rethinking a lot personally, and that's going to affect how the workforce goes forward. The companies and I think the other thing too is people and companies, companies right now, their dilemma is, do I bring my workforce back into the office? Do I force them to do that? Or do I let them work remotely? The jury is out on what is the best way to go. It varies by company, depends on the company culture, depends on the type of workers they have and so forth. But again, having said that, a lot of people can't work remotely. So, you know, what are you going to do if you're stocking the warehouse at Amazon or manning the fire truck and so forth? That's a different conversation. As you know, probably in your area, it's certainly the case here. You go to a restaurant, they're short staffed. You know, I mean, you can't find, and even in normal retail operations, they're reducing hours, doing more online because they can't find workers, and on and on and on. So I know the restaurant here at our development is now closed 2 days a week. They can't find staff, they can't find cooks. So that's going to be an ongoing issue, especially if the labor force participation rate continues to decrease. And then the last thing I'll say is it's just too soon to determine definitively what the overall impact of the pandemic is. As I say, we've already seen just in the last month with the Delta variant, communities going back on their, mandates. They had them before, you got to wear a mask indoor. Nope, now you don't have to, now you do again. I just saw a quick article this morning and read, I guess the CDC is rethinking their indoor mask, advice. So we just don't know where this is going to end up. And we just talking about the United States. You think about what's going on in sub-Saharan Africa, India, Asia. I mean, only a fraction of their population. My wife and I are talking about when can we travel internationally again? I mean, it's going to be a while. So you're fine in the United States, maybe, unless you go to Arkansas, I guess, or Missouri. But what if you want to go to Singapore or to somewhere in Africa? So I think we'll have to have this conversation again in the end of 2023. But it's going to be a lot of fundamental changes. But at this point, we're speculating on where things are going to go, and everything's going to change again. So let me stop there. I think I'm at more or less toward the end of my time, and hopefully we have time for questions and criticisms or whatever you wish. So I'll stop there.
So interesting. I love this. Thank you. I have my first question is from Al. The top states in addition to Virginia, and what is Michigan's rank?
Oh my goodness! You know what? I don't know. I can find out. Let me. I'll go online and look while I'm. Michigan's ranking, I can tell you, has improved over the years. There were some fundamental changes to Michigan. We had the old single business tax. If you remember that, that always ranked as very, very low. But since they changed to a more conventional taxation system, that is different. So go ahead, and I'm gonna look on CNBC Best States. Ask me the next question.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. I don't have any in the chat, so if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question or make a comment, please feel free to do so.
Looking at Holland, and I'm assuming many other cities, there is such a tension and a problem with affordable housing. You mentioned early in the talk about large cities having vacancy rates, increased vacancies, but in so many places, I believe there's so much pressure because there is not the affordable housing available for the workforce that we really need. Do you have any comments on that?
That's a dilemma a lot of cities are facing. And the problem is that every city wants to have affordable housing, but they can't convince developers to build it, right? Because I don't care what kind of housing you build, it still has to make financial sense, right? And so unless communities are willing to provide subsidies or do upzoning or different kinds of techniques to incentivize the developers, they're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. Their answer will always be, well, it's got to pencil. It's got to make sense, which is true. And so that's going to be a dilemma for cities for years to come. That's why I say cities that have a already regularly or generally affordable housing base will have an advantage in that regard. Having said that, people have looked at manufactured housing, turning shipping crates into housing, you name it, trying to find different ways to deal with that. But in terms of a substantial enough amount of affordable housing, that's going to be a delay. No one's solved that problem yet. And cities will say, well, listen, we'll let you build, an extra 10 stories on your building, but you have to provide X% of market rate or affordable housing. And usually that gets negotiated down to, it doesn't make much difference when they actually have to do it. So if the city pushes too hard and say, well, we need 20% of the housing to be quote unquote affordable, the developers go, I'm not going to do the project. I can't afford to do that. So trying to find that balance between what's doable and what the community would like to have done is a difficult problem. And that's true for all communities. And if you're already in a costly market, that it makes the situation even worse. So I don't know if that's an answer, but that's the reality.
Okay, I have a couple more questions while you're looking. Let's see. What will city planners recommend for transportation infrastructure?
What would they recommend?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's hard to say. I'll just use my experience in living in Northern Virginia in the DC metro area. I mean, when I was there pre-pandemic, right, all they can talk about is how can we add more lanes to the highways? We've got 4, but now we need 8. And we're going to have dedicated bus lanes, and we're going to have, what's the word? Dedicated lanes for more than one passenger car, 2 or 3 passengers in a car, that kind of thing. But they also had a robust public transportation, so subway and that kind of thing. The problem is how to finance that. You're seeing a lot more public-private partnerships where a private company will actually build a road and then lease it back to the community for a period of time, 40 or 50 years. And the community will pay the private company a share, dollars to basically run the system. So you're seeing a lot of those models started on the East Coast to build, more roads and so forth. The problem now is, whoa, we needed, 8 lanes, but now our pedestrian our commuter traffic has dropped to half of what it was before. Can we afford that now? Because the financing models are based on a certain amount of passengers, cars. All of a sudden, the financing model doesn't work. So what are you going to do now? I'm really curious. I know in the DC area, they've got billions of dollars already, programmed and under construction for this. I haven't really followed in terms of how they're going to deal with, reduced traffic. And so I think they're waiting to see what the permanent patterns are and so forth. But I don't know. So city planners have always advocated fewer roads and more public transit, more walkability, and so forth and so on. So I do think you will see conversion certainly within cities of, an extra lane of traffic to, pedestrian or some other use. And so I think you would see that. I think the issue is going to be for the broader systems, how are we going to pay for a sprawling system of roads if the finance models that we relied on to do it in the first place don't work anymore? Hard to say, but I would say city planners generally argue for a more compact urban system rather than a sprawling area system. It's more efficient, more fiscally responsible, less of a climate impact, and so forth. So that's what they would argue. I haven't really read the literature from, say, the American Planning Association on what they're thinking about in terms of that, but I guarantee you that's a topic. It is a topic in economic development, but we don't, do the real estate and the architecture. So the planners, I'm sure, are noodling on, okay, what kinds of trends do we seeing now that will change the way cities look? I think that we will certainly see a lot more repurposing, as I mentioned before. It's uses that are now obsolete being converted. There's an overabundance of office space. That's the number one thing. There's just too much office space. And in a lot of markets, there's too much retail space, physical retail space. So let's say you have a big mall that's all of a sudden vacant and it's 500,000 square feet. That's a lot of space to repurpose. So what uses can go into that? And then can you convince the developer, or it's the lease or ownership? What are we going to do about that? So that's going to be a continuing conversation over the next, quite a bit of period of time.
Great. I'm going to ask this question that just came in next, and then I'll go back to a couple, but this is related to what you were just talking about, I think. From Gary, autonomous vehicles are expected to impact cities in many ways. AVs are slow to arrive, but they will happen. How do you see that technology affecting urban planning?
Yeah, very good question. I think with regard to autonomous vehicles, the first autonomous vehicles you're really going to see having an impact aren't cars, they're trucks. Because why? Trucks have predetermined routes and they're prescribed, right? We got to get from the warehouse, big warehouse, to the small warehouse. And it's a direct path, and back and forth. That's easier to do from an autonomous perspective. So a number of companies are working on it. There's one here in Arizona that is developing an autonomous electric autonomous vehicle truck. So I think that's going to be the first thing where you're really going to see the impact. All the buzz has been around autonomous cars, right? But so they seem to be making progress, and then all of a sudden, some guy falls asleep at the wheel of his autonomous Tesla, and it crashes and burns or whatever the case might be, right? And so everybody rethinks that. The software engineers probably can solve that, but the problem is you've got human beings involved, intervening, making mistakes, whatever the case might be. If everything was autonomous and could be programmed properly, that wouldn't be a problem, but that's not the case. You always have human beings. So I think a lot of people are very skeptical about that. I think that that's going to be a long time in truly coming to be, you know, as I say, from an engineering perspective, I think the problem is going to be solved. But let's say, you know, you have a strange mix of autonomous and non-autonomous vehicles. How's that going to work on a city street? I think that, you know, maybe urban transportation like Uber or Lyft might be a kind of thing where you could call a vehicle autonomously. You know, from my hotel room, I need to go to the airport. That's a direct, you know, drive, and you know, something like that might happen. But just kind of tooling around town in an automobile, autonomous automobile, I don't know. Maybe I'm a skeptic. I'm old school, whatever. I think that's going to be a long, long time in coming. I do see it happening first in the transportation sector. But after that, I think it's going to be some time before, even if the technology is proven to be relatively, you know, safe and worthwhile, I think people are going to be skeptical. It sounds intriguing, but I think it's going to be a while before it's really adopted by a lot of people.
Okay. Then we have, this is a good one. Has your sister made you sit down and read Holland's new Unified Development Plan? And if so, what do you think of its general recognition of the trends that you mentioned overall?
She never even mentioned it. I didn't know they had one.
Oh, Carol. All right.
Okay, Carol, I will be getting that, I'm sure, very shortly.
We'll get back to you then on that one.
Yeah, I've read Tucson's, but
yeah.
Okay. While you're looking, okay, I got the list up. All right, of the best states. Okay, so yeah, Virginia was one. North Carolina is number 2. Utah number 3. Texas 4. Tennessee is number 5. Here's Michigan. I saw it. Illinois jumped 15 spots to number 5. Michigan, they were 24th, and now they're 11th. There you go.
Wow.
At least that's
I'll attribute
CNBC.
a lot of that to Northern Michigan based on what I'm hearing.
Well,
property
you
being
know,
gobbled
actually, if you look at Michigan, there are certain areas of the state that are doing very well. Grand Rapids is one of them. Grand Rapids metro area has blown it out of the water in the last 10 years in terms of job growth, population growth, and so forth. And I know it's been a long time since I've been to downtown Grand Rapids, but I know there's a lot going on there. So, and college towns, Ann Arbor, East Lansing, are going to always do well because you've got the university driving so much of the growth there. Detroit, actually, downtown Detroit is doing very well. I mean, rents have increased both for office space as well as residential. But there's too many endemic problems in Detroit. Their school system is a disaster. Crime's bad again, on and on and on. So that's going to hold the city back. But there are certain spots in Michigan, you know, the Traverse, northwest Michigan, Traverse City, and so forth, you know, because of tourism. And a lot of people have relocated to that area, work from home kinds of things. And it's a beautiful area. I can work from home. So I've heard that that's driven, you know, a lot of that too. Then you've got some Upper Peninsula towns, you know, Marquette, Houghton, Hancock, they do well. They have a number of good factors. And so on balance, the state's going to do well. But to be honest with you, sorry, Flint, Benton Harbor, Jackson, Saginaw. I know Saginaw ranked well in this in terms of housing, but I mean, there's some trends there that are going to be very, very hard to overcome because they've been going on for 20 plus, 30 plus years. So anyway, it's a mixed bag in Michigan, but I would say that Michigan overall as a state has definitely improved. I know when I used to work for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and we were always ranked low because of the tax structure. and a number of other things. And so Michigan did make strides over the last 10, 12 years in terms of tax structure, competitiveness, and so forth. One thing Michigan needs to do, all states need to do this, is invest more in their public education system, both at the K-12 level and at the university level. I will tell you that it's pathetic what all states are doing or not doing. And I'm living in one that underfunds their K-12 and university system. Unbelievable. Arizona, it's terrible. And so the states that are able to find ways to do that, the problem is this. If states are losing, Michigan's population has been stable at about 10 million for years and years and years, but the demographics are going in the wrong direction. They're still losing younger people. And who populates the K-12 system and then ultimately the university system? It's younger people, right? Kids. If you're not growing as a state, your long-term is not a good situation. In the United States, our growth rate has dropped down to almost zero now. So it's going to be a zero-sum game. States like Texas, Florida, Arizona that are growing are going to have the leg up in terms of that population driving investment and public funds for things. So Michigan's got some challenges ahead of it in terms of just the pure demographics, and that translates to how your public education system is funded. So that's going to be an issue. Not everybody can be a private university or like the University of Michigan say, well, they don't have to raise tuition. We'll just, for in-state students, we'll just double it for the out-of-state students, and all the Chinese and Indian kids will pay it, right? I don't mean to be glib about that, but the fact of the matter is when you're getting 30% of your student undergraduate base from international students, that's helpful. So it's difficult on the state universities. And then unless a private college or small college does have an endowment or something, a benefactor, that makes it tough for them as well. But states as a whole are drastically underfunding. And I hope that one of the good that we didn't talk about what good comes out of the pandemic in terms of that, I hope that we learn some lessons like funding basic research and development. And whether that it's it would be great if it's in medicine because that's been underfunded, but in all areas of competitiveness, the United States has really underfunded pure research and development that leads to advances in science technology that are beneficial. And I don't mean a new app that is, your funny cat or dog app, stuff that's meaningless. I'm talking about serious investments and things that help quality of life issues and social issues. That's where that money needs to go. So I'm giving you my opinion side of things right now.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. Another one here is interesting. A pattern in the US has been documented for liberal voting coming from cities and conservative from rural areas. Do you see changes in voting evolving from the migration you described that could change political action in the US?
Great question. Well, I'll give you an example. Here in our development, we're actually in a community. It's relatively new, 10 years old, and it's all new housing. So it started in 2010. So everybody here was a transplant, right? And most of them, there were local Arizonans who had moved certainly in here, but the big drivers have been people coming from the West, California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and then, still from the Midwest and the East and so forth. But so Arizona is a very conservative state. It's changing, but it's still, I don't know that it's a purple state. I know we have 2 Democratic senators now, right, with Sinema and Mark Kelly. There's some debate as to whether Sinema is actually a Republican or a Democrat, I guess. And that's a whole nother issue. I'm not getting to that. But so all these people from California that have moved here, who are they? They're the people that want to get the heck out of California, which they see as basically a socialist republic. They're going, I'm moving to Arizona. I can carry a gun in public. The taxes are low. And consequently, it's my kind of place. So this development where we're getting these people from California, and the same is true from, Oregon yeah, Oregon and Washington, which are generally liberal states as well. They're coming to Arizona. So there's going to be that growth that's going to be weighing on the conservative side. The liberal side is people migrating from Tucson, the city, or Phoenix, or maybe Flagstaff to this development. So right now it's still conservative in our area, but the state as a whole is in balance. It's hard to say which way it'll go. The midterm elections will be really interesting for this state. It's hard to say. You know, I came from Virginia. That state definitely has moved from red to purple and now blue. I think, you know, you've got a former governor, Terry McAuliffe, who was out of office. Ralph North was another, he was a Democrat. Ralph North is a Democrat. Terry's running again. Biden was just, you know, there last week supporting him at a campaign event. So Virginia statewide is going to go blue. But if you go, there's two parts of Virginia, and this is true for a lot of states, right? There's Nova, Northern Virginia, and Rova, the rest of Virginia, south of the Rappahannock River. That's all conservative, absolutely conservative. So it's which grows faster, the conservative areas or the liberal areas? Hard to say. And so was the question about Michigan or just generally? And I don't know that the pandemic is going to change those voting patterns. Like there's been migration, but I don't think it's enough to bend the curve on what's already, trends that are already in place. I don't think that's the case. So I think that states that were already trending blue are going to continue to trend blue. States that are solidly red and going to stay that way, they're going to stay that way as well. Rural America is going to stay conservative. No doubt about that in my mind whatsoever and forever. So.
I think that's all I have.
We have somebody.
Other than our environmental attorney who thinks the progress to all autonomous vehicles will be sooner than you think, but we shall see. Thank you, Tom.
Oh, well, it could be. I could easily be wrong. I'm a, you know, kind of a skeptic at heart sometimes. And I guess I looked at it from a practical perspective. And maybe I look at it too much from my perspective. I want to control that steering wheel and accelerator. I'm sorry, you know. This is why it's going to be hard for me to convince me to take an electric vehicle. Because when I hear the sound of a real engine, I mean a internal combustion engine, no better sound. That's what happens when you grow up in Detroit, though. What are you going to do? You know?
Thanks, Jeff. All right, anybody else who wants to make a comment or question, please go ahead.
So either bored you, confused you, or what?
No. I'm just wondering, can people see me now? Anyways, so
I'm going to stop the share screen so that everybody can see each other.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. You want me to stop the share?
I did it. There we go.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
So Jeff, I was wondering, you know, you said you mentioned a bunch of states that are doing really well right now, Texas, right. Arizona, but the other mix in here is in our climate change. And I think Michigan is in a much better position. So I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see another, I mean, they're predicting migration patterns from the south of the United States to the upper part of the United States. What do you think about that? I mean, I think that's going to throw a lot of these current trends into a new direction.
I think you asked me that question before. I mean, certainly cities like Phoenix, which are growing crazy, and the house, you know, somebody, I don't know, Carol, it was you or somebody else, the house prices in Phoenix in the last year went up 31%. Median home price in 1 year. And so Carol was asking, well, why are people moving to a area that's going to run out of water? People don't think that way. People think about, how can I get a bigger home, pay less taxes, have good schools and so forth. I mean, they make decisions based on the next year or 2 years or whatever. They don't think 10 or 15 years down the line. I was just talking this morning at our pickleball thing to a guy who's a financial planner, and he goes, that's right. People just don't think 10 or 20 years out, or it's not that they don't think about it. It's just they don't make decisions based on that. They make decisions based on what's confronting them right now. So cities like Phoenix are going to continue to grow because people go, oh, I ain't gotta, I just sold my home in California, my 1,500 square foot home in Los Angeles for $1.3 million, right? I can buy a mansion in Phoenix for that kind of money and still have money to travel, and whatever. Or the schools, let's say you're in a big, in a community and that's really not a climate change issue, but I mean, the decisions they're making, my point is, are based on what's confronting them today, immediately. They don't think about, we're going to run out of water. It's there, but it's back of mind. It's not a decision point. People don't think that way. They don't act that way. So it's a rationality thing. I know there's a theory about what that is, but it's not my area of expertise. So, but anyway, at some point it would have to, here's the other thing. Americans don't make fundamental changes unless they're confronted with a crisis. We're generally an optimistic country. And so we think, we'll figure it out. It's not that bad. The engineers will figure it out. The software guys, the environmentalists, whatever, they'll figure it out. We'll be okay. We'll find a way, because we always have been. We've gotten through the Depression. We've got through 2 world wars. We've got through 9/11. We got through the Great Recession. Now we're going to get through the pandemic. We're all going to be fine one way or another. Things may be changed a little bit, but whatever. Now, of course, if somebody's house just got burned to the ground in a California fire because of the climate change, or your home just got wiped out in, outside of New Orleans because of sea level rise, that's different. Now that's a thing. But how many of those people, I'm always amazed in the South, people get wiped out in hurricanes and they interview these people and they go, what are you going to do now? This is the 3rd time your house. They go, rebuild. What, here? Yeah. What? So that's what I'm saying, is like rationality sometimes doesn't enter into the equation, and long-term rationality enters less so. So that's why I don't see out here in the West, or even in the South, I don't see anything that's holding Texas back. I mean, the fastest growing communities, you talk about Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, they are going crazy. And and I think that's going to continue for a long, long time to come. So I don't see any fundamental big change there based on climate change, even though you'd like to think that was a factor in people's thinking, but it to be honest, it's really not.
Okay.
I'd like to offer a comment about the autonomous vehicle issue.
Yeah.
It is certainly true that every time some idiot ignores their responsibilities in a Tesla and wraps themselves around a median,
right,
it makes the newspapers. But right there in Arizona, you have Waymo now using plug-in hybrid Pacificas that are equipped with the complete autonomous vehicle sensing system.
Yeah.
They're now running basically a taxi service with no safety drivers in the seat, no engineer on board, within a geofenced area in Phoenix.
Right.
And so far, they have given over 100,000 rides. There has not yet been a traffic incident in which one of the Waymo vehicles was considered to be at fault. I think the slow but steady progress of folks like Waymo and Cruise is going to eventually succeed where Tesla's high-risk approach may not.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I agree with you. I think that, and Waymo is a good example. I think with those kind of routing, whether it's a taxi service or whether it's a transportation, a goods transportation service, they will adopt autonomous vehicles. They already have, and there will be more of that. So I think that will be the opening way. And maybe as those are successful, the other, more human impacted models may start to catch on. I don't know. Again, maybe it's more of a personal, kind of thing, but more success in that area will get people to think. I think the electric side of it certainly is going to happen. I think that there is a fundamental shift. You look at what the automotive, all the R&D monies that the automotive companies are putting in now, it's all into electric. They are putting very little into trying to tweak internal combustion engines or, you know, what the systems are right now. So that is clearly the case. Ford Motor basically took over the old Michigan Central Depot in Detroit, and that's all for electric vehicle production. So that's a reality for sure. You're also quiet.
Question. It's my impression that in Holland, the senior population is growing, not only because a larger population is growing older within Holland, but I'm impressed with, just look at the HASP membership. How many of HASP's members have come here from some other part of the country where they may have connections to Holland, but they're choosing Holland now. Just because you grew up in a hometown doesn't necessarily mean you're dying to retire there.
Right.
Holland has a tremendous influx of people over 60 who are close to retirement, or they're retiring, or they're retired. A lot of times people think that people over 60 stay where they are, or they immediately choose assisted living.
Right.
And in fact, it's a huge demographic of people who have their usually nest egg to invest. I mean, they've sold a home, they're ready to come here, they're ready to buy, they know what they can afford, and they're coming to Holland with knowing what they want, intending to stay here, making a commitment to the community. And it seems to me that a lot of times the people over 60 are undervalued by the city planners as to what they bring and the ways that they move into the historic districts and renovate a home, or take an interest in public volunteering for public things they want to do, and really make being a contributing citizen for up to 20 or 25 years. I mean, just at 60, you can easily be active into your 80s, you know, sort of giving more than you take in the large sense. Is that a trend? Is Holland sort of becoming a retirement mecca, let's say, more than other cities like Holland? Or do you see retirees choosing certain places and having more choices as it becomes easier to move around the country?
Yeah.
Don't always move where your children are and so forth.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think that, you know, there's always articles about best places to retire and so forth. And if you look at those articles, because look at the overall demographic trend is an aging population of the United States. I mean, there's just no question about it. That's the largest growth cohort going forward. As I said before, the US birth rate is down to almost zero. And so it's really the, you know, 55 and over, you know, cohorts that are really growing. So communities would be smart to focus on that and cater to that, provide, you know, the set of amenities and that sort of thing. And I think that if you look at the best places to retire, that set of amenities that I talked about for small towns in terms of quality of life and having a university and great recreational and cultural activities, walkability, downtown, are the same things that appeal to older folks, right? And so they are making, I think, a conscious decision to move that. I think the one mitigating factor to that is that I hear all the time, because people here move from somewhere, everyone here moved from somewhere else, is if you have grandkids, where do they live? That is a pull that keeps people in their existing metropolitan area, for, you know, if their family's there. I know when we lived in Virginia, a lot of people retired there because the kids and grandkids were in there. And that's a big metro area, right? 6 million people. So there was plenty of that happening. The Tucson area here, people are coming from all over, and their grandkids, very few of them live in the area. I mean, they live, you know, back in Colorado or in Wisconsin or Michigan or whatever the case. My two, I've got one in Denver and another one up in Edmonton, Canada. And so as long as we can get to an airport, we'll go, you know, we'll go. But the quality of life things, and that's the reason we happen to be an active adult community. We're not downtown or anything, but I can get to downtown Tucson, to the university, We just signed up for the Broadway series, for the symphony, et cetera, et cetera. So I've got the amenity set that I need here, but the quality of life to choose that quality of life. So city planners would do well to focus on that because it is a community that can give back. There's no question, add a lot to the community. I know I think we're enamored with, millennials and Gen Z, and we kind of cater to them in a lot of ways, which I find disconcerting as an older person. But I think that seniors can certainly add a lot to the community in terms of resources and so forth and so on. And they have a lot of disposable income too. I mean, we're the ones generally who can afford going out to dinner, attending a play, supporting a local arts and cultural institution, that kind of thing. So and I think that's a great point.
Hiring help and having things done for us that create work for other people.
Yeah.
And seniors are more likely to be a continuing population. Young people who are climbing the ladder, they're in their careers and taking a professional step, are going to take another one later. So they can be 5 years and then move again.
Absolutely.
Coming to Tucson or on their way up, maybe somewhere else.
Yeah.
So from the standpoint of building that remaining sustained population that are not dependent, well, everybody depends on services, but they're active citizens, let's say. They're in their active years of being involved in the community.
Sure.
Sometimes young people are so busy with their professions that they can't join things and lead community organizations and do political things. And
yeah, great point. And I couldn't agree more. So when Carol sends me that Holland plan, I will be sure to comment on that point and make my point. And as a 72-year-old, I'm not moving anymore. I'm done. So anything I contribute now will be in my backyard.
Okay.
My kids, I don't know. Who knows? They'll, 5 years, we're done. We're somewhere else now. I don't know, whatever.
Maybe when you see how extensive that plan is, you'll be sorry that you ever started this conversation. But it's a unifying plan that it increases mixed use in more neighborhoods than where it was permitted before. That's one of the themes of it. That fits what you're saying.
I would say absolutely. Any community that can encourage more mixed uses, whether they're horizontal mixed use or vertical mixed use, is, I think, doing the right thing. People used to live above where they worked, right? If you worked on a farm, you lived in the house, but then you walked over to the pasture or whatever. If you worked in a city, you fixed shoes downstairs and then you lived upstairs. That's the way it used to be for hundreds and hundreds of years. The separation of work and live space is a relatively new phenomenon. It was driven by the automobile, first by streetcars, subways, and then the automobile. So I think we're trending back to a little bit the way it used to be, especially in suburban areas and small towns.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the most, there was strong objection to one feature of the new code, which had to do with people living in the historic districts not wanting mixed use to come into the historic districts, especially walking distance to downtown. That became a thorn, so that the city council adjusted it several times to take care of those objections. About not everything has to be mixed use. There is,
Well, you can have that. I mean, certainly you can have mixed use areas adjacent to just purely residential areas without damaging the character. I think, so that's something that could be accommodated. From a planning perspective, that can be done. That can be done. And protect your historic, areas as well. Mixed use areas can be historic areas too, right?
Exactly. I mean, particularly in Holland.
Yeah.
Many of the homes in the historic districts have attics that were rented to somebody from the beginning. They weren't just students' quarters, they were students or a rental unit to increase income or something like that. So and there's always been a mix of rentals in the historic areas. So it's not that rental is.
So you should rent that out to a work from homer millennial. Say, listen, you don't have to live in New York or Detroit or New York City, right? You can rent my attic for, a fraction and work from there.
True.
enjoy all the amenities, right? Get a little extra income for that senior.
There are many beautiful attics in Holland.
Oh, yeah.
So Jeff, I have a kind of a question, you know, with the problems of getting service workers. Then a lot of them, after the pandemic, they don't want to go back. Talk about a reassessment. It's like, I worked my butt off, you know, my feet off, my back off. Will there be any pull, like pay wise? Do you think that'll propel
Well, yeah, I think,
wages?
yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Healthcare workers?
Yeah, but it's not gonna be, if I was making, you know, $12.50 an hour at a warehouse, it's not, they're all of a sudden not gonna be making $20 at the warehouse, right? They may go from 12 to 14 or 15, but there has been a push for minimum wage, you know, get up to at least the $15 level. We were traveling a couple weeks ago and we were in Colorado. McDonald's, $20 an hour to start, and we pay a $500 signing bonus. And they're still having trouble getting workers. You know, you've heard these stories about companies that would send out, they'd get, they post a job and would have 10 people agree to come in for an interview and only one would show up. That's happening all over the place. And that's for all kinds of jobs. It's worse in the retail and service sector. The problem is, let's say you were waiting tables. Well, are you going to do you have the time and energy to go and get retrained to be a computer coder or whatever the case might be, or a skilled trade? I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of jobs going begging, but they tend to be technical jobs, you know, running a CNC machine or, you know, doing computer coding. There, at any one time right now, I just saw for you the other day, there are 350,000 unfilled software engineering positions in the United States. Every day, they can't get them, and they're paying whatever it takes. And if you're a software engineer, you can go, yeah, you know, call your own shots. But if you're in the retail or service sector, you don't have any leverage per se. You know, I mean, you have leverage to go from, I'm saying this, you know, pejoratively in a way, McDonald's to Burger King or something for $2 more an hour. Is that really going to get you over the hump? So I don't know what the solution is. That's going to be a permanent problem. And, you know, go back to school. And then you have the childcare issue too. That's a problem. We didn't really talk about that, but it is a big problem, you know, right now. I look at our kids. We've got our ones in Denver. They have 3 kids. They both work. They make, you know, great money, but one's working from home full time. The other one has to go to the office. But with 3 kids, but they can afford to put somebody in daycare, right? Or somebody else has got an au pair or something like that. But, you know, that's a small segment of the population. So childcare, taking care of an elderly person, if you're younger, that has a lot of issues. So I don't know. That's going to be a permanent problem. Get used to it. I think, yeah, I guess we're going to all have to eat at home now because the restaurants are going to close left and right. Oh, no.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
they are. I know.
Yeah. Well, luckily you've got DoorDash, Uber Eats. You can get everything shipped to your house right now, right? You know, all you gotta do is pop it in a microwave, piece of cake, right? No problem.
Let's see if there's any more. I don't think there were any other questions.
Double check the chat. I think we're good in the chat box. I covered everything. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thank you so much, Jeff,
Yep.
for zooming in with us from Arizona, and to Carol for
Yep.
bringing her brother to our program. That was awesome.
Good.
One benefit of Zoom and working remote is we have been able to have speakers from all over the country in the last 6 months or so.
Yes. Yep.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we'll continue a hybrid model for sure.
Yeah. I tell you, I talked to my colleagues back in my previous job, and they've managed the work. They were, you know, first few months were tough. And I think they just went back July 1st. But I know I talked to my former executive assistant. She goes, I love this working from home stuff. You know, I don't have to deal with all those idiots. I mean, all the other employees at the office. There are pros and cons, and there's some really interesting articles. Any of you involved